there's not like a single way of answering that question, but part of what you're picking up on, and I think this is very true about the vacillation between like a conservative and a like something else activist, let's say, perspective, is that what's now seen as conservative is like to think about due process. So like I'm somebody who got, well, because you're asking what should evidence be, which is a question having to do with due process. And part of my realization as I myself, went through this Title IX process and heard about other people's experience with Title IX is that there is not due process. There's not like a you're not told what the charges are against you. You're not told like what the rules of evidence are, that sort of thing. So it's a kind of kangaroo court situation that a lot of people, and a lot of people who, as I say, are marginalized, queer, people of color, find themselves in, because in any justice system, those are the people whose rights are most immediately suspended. So all of these things are kind of true at once, but the to believe in, say, like free speech is considered to be a conservative position at this moment, and to talk about due process as opposed to believe the survivor is considered a conservative position. So believe the survivor is not the same thing as due process, because due process would take both accounts into consideration and try to proceed along some organized rules of evidence. So, that's some brief answer to what I'm saying. But yeah, these are very contradictory and complicated and, situations. And I'm just trying to actually, out of my own, interest in intellectual honesty, try to provide some counter-narrative to what I, certainly understand to be the prevailing understandings in the room, which I think are based on not a lot of information.
Angela, can I take a shot as well? Sure. So, for me, I'm a big believer in the preponderance of the evidence as the evidentiary standard that should be used for non-criminal cases. I think that any other standard can have the potential to advantage women over men, men over women, individuals who are cisgender over those who are trans, and vice versa. And so, for me, the preponderance creates a level playing field, and whether the Department of Education continues to approve of that in the college environment, I hope it continues to be the prevalent legal standard for non-criminal cases.
Do people know what preponderance is? Because it's like 50-50 plus a feather is the
It's the greater weight of the evidence. What's more likely than not is the standard that is currently the standard for all Title IX cases and all discrimination cases throughout our legal system. I'd also say, just in partial defense of Laura, that in an hour and 45 minutes, there's really no way to unpack her assessment of the anecdotes that she shared. Whether it was valuable to share anecdotes or not is a different question. But having had lengthy conversations with Laura for a very long time, and knowing the way that she brings a journalistic, forensic assessment to these facts, there's more than she's shared. And I wouldn't suggest that she's being superficial with what she labels facts. And if you're interested, you can look at her book and see just how deeply she delved into the particular case that she examines there. I have not found her intellectually unsatisfying in that particular realm, but I can see how in a forum like this it might come off that way.
My name is Daniel. I'm a junior here at Pomona. So I have two different questions. If one is too different from the other, I'm happy to go back in line. But my first question is, so earlier in the forum, I forget who described it as this, but the Me Too movement was described as fractured. And so I wanted to ask whether being fractured or perhaps like more democratized is a benefit or a detriment? Is it a benefit in the sense that it democratizes access, or is it detrimental in the sense that there's no kind of leader or a group of leader-like figures that can kind of marshal the movement together?
Yeah, that was me. And I think it's one of its greatest assets because power isn't centralized, which enables anyone who's involved in the movement to hold power and to be heard. The challenge with the fractured movement, and you can see the same thing with Black Lives Matter, is that people don't take it seriously. We live in a country that is very much interested in figureheads and in the consolidation of power. And so when power is dispersed, people get very uncomfortable. And this actually connects to the question the young woman asked earlier about how do we get justice in a world where there are a lot of people who cannot or do not want to access the justice system. And one of the key things is thinking about how we fracture and disperse power and put less power on carceral systems that disproportionately punish Black people in particular, but also other marginalized people and undocumented Americans. And so I do think it's a wonderful aspect of the movement, and I do think we have enough figureheads. Tawana Burke, who started Me Too, is finally getting her due, and she's doing a lot of incredible advocacy and is being heard. And again, Time's Up is doing some great work. There are many valid critiques to be made of Time's Up, and I also am very suspicious of any organization that can raise $25 million as quickly as they did, though I contributed and because I think it's important, and I am involved in Time's Up behind the scenes, full disclaimer, but I think it's a step in the right direction, and hopefully more people will see what's happening and feel like they can contribute and take ownership in what's going on.
I agree. I think the multifaceted nature of Me Too is one of its greatest strengths.
No. He's just such a nice young man.
If you don't mind, just maybe get in line and that way.
Time's up.
Hi, first of all, I just wanted to say, Roxanne, I'm such a great admirer of your work, and Pomona College should be very honored that you came here. My second question is towards Laura, and I wrote down a list of the things you said because I wanted to make sure that I got your wording exactly right when I posed my question. And you seem to be offering this frustration at people who have had the experience of being shamed, having their name dragged through the mud, and being denied access to education. I wonder if you could apply that same logic on an even greater scale to people who are victims and survivors of sexual assault. Because it feels like there's a lot that you're addressing within that realm, and I understand that that's an important narrative that you feel is necessary to tell, but I think I agree with Roxanne in the sense that you seem to have a very majority view, and maybe that's just the words that you're projecting tonight. But in terms of if you're worried about shaming, and if you're worried about doubt, and if you're worried about people not getting the access to higher education that they need, I think there is a problem within the other side too, that you don't seem to be looking at the same rate. And I didn't mean for that to be an unfair question, simply looking at both sides.
I don't think that accurately reflects, what I actually am trying to get at, because, as I said, I think that there certainly is an issue with sexual assault, sexual harassment, all forms of sexual misconduct that have historically not been sufficiently dealt with. But what I'm actually also trying to talk about is that in these adjudication methods that are adopted at this moment, there are vast amounts of unfairness that are going on that we also should be concerned with simultaneously. And I think that those are not as well known, and it doesn't feel as good to talk about those. So yeah, I'm bringing up the sort of unpopular or less popular maybe aspects of this.
So Laura, maybe one way to try to add something, because otherwise it just kind of keeps sounding somewhat the same about here's this narrative, here's that narrative. So one way to try to press the question is, okay, so there's this potential fairness over here, and what she's addressing is the potential fairness on the other side, and when we have to weigh those up, what should the system look like? How do we compare those and then come to an all things considered judgment? Does that make sense? I mean, there's the worry that
when you say, look at people being unjustly accused, being ground up in the system, and then, you know, Roxanne saying, look, but the obsession with that compared to like the total ignoring of the other side. So that, you know, that's why the narrative's gone that way, but, so you're like, don't forget this side, but I think the question is like, how are we gonna come to an all things considered, how do we weigh it in? So like, let's get that story back up, and now tell us how to think about both together. That,
Yeah, I mean,
help press a bit?
A little bit,
I
yeah.
think one of the things I'm trying to do is sort of slow down the momentum, and sort of ask us to think harder about how we're forming judgments about this stuff by bringing up some evidence or, you know, things that I have learned and trying to share with you that you guys may not be aware of, partly because all of this stuff, as I said, happens behind closed doors. For me to bring up the other side doesn't mean I'm not concerned about sexual justice or empowerment for women and minorities and people who are marginalized in various ways. So I guess part of maybe what I'm not doing as much as I guess you're asking me to do is sort of gesture toward a recognition of those situations. So yeah, I could do that, but we're also being asked to talk about what are we not thinking about. So I guess that's what I was trying to do. So I think I wasn't trying to like credentialize myself by saying, yes, I'm on the side of social and sexual justice. So maybe I should have asserted that a bit more at the beginning.
I just have to say one thing. I just think, and you've said this a few times tonight, but it's insulting to think that people are just caught up in the moment and just wrapped up in momentum and aren't considering that other side. I think people are considering that other side and considering matters of evidence and believing survivors and falling on the side of survivors who drop out of school far more than rapists or accused rapists ever drop out of school or leave universities. It's not short-sighted thinking, it's not wishful thinking, it's not gesturing and sort of saying the right thing about sexual violence at all. I mean, who has time for that? These are actual lives that are at stake and actual people who have endured trauma who are looking for recourse in some form or fashion. It really, I understand that you know, when you only look at the media, perhaps, it's easy to think we're all just lemmings who are wildly susceptible to a nicely written news article. But that's not what's happening in lived experience on college campuses, in workplaces, in neighborhoods, in factories, everywhere. People are mature enough and smart enough to consider the big picture and to think of the poor accused men and also still believe women. It's just, we can't be dismissed that easily. It's just, I think people are smarter than that.
I think part of what I'm trying to add to the story is that the people who are getting swept up in these accusatory scenarios, it's not just men, it's plenty of women, and as I'm saying, it's plenty of queer people. A queer professor that I've talked to recently said she thinks that more queer professors are accused of stuff than non-queer professors. So that's another element of the story that I actually, think is important to consider, that it's not just people in power who are being accused in these situations.
This question is just for Dr. Gay. Thank you so much for being here, and also for bringing up Tarana Burke. And that's actually what my question's about. So, as you can see, Me Too has clearly garnered a lot of support across a wide variety of audiences. But when Tarana Burke made this hashtag years ago, it was to a very specific experience of Black women in this country. And how do we resist that flattening that I think can make some of the critiques you hinted at earlier come up?
We have to be active and intersectional, and I know people hate when we say the word intersectional, and I understand why, because people just think, let's just perform our wokeness, but it's not about performing wokeness. It's about actually recognizing that people from different subject positions deal with sexual harassment and sexual violence in different ways. And what Tarana Burke dealt with is far different from what a random white woman dealt with. And both experiences need to be validated and need to be heard and considered, But we cannot forget that not all women are created equal, and not all women experience sexual violence equally and have recourse equally. And it's really frustrating to see it flattened into just women, and as if all women are created equal when they're not. And so we have to just be active and resist it. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of energy, and a lot of times, you know, I remember I was in a meeting of powerful women in Hollywood, and before, like, when Me Too first happened, and a lot of these meetings were being convened in various circles, and it was, you know, a bunch of privileged people sitting around talking about privileged people shit. And, you know, one of the things that I was stunned by was the way that women were being flattened. And women in that room who have had incredible careers, who are showrunners and who are doing amazing things, like the most famous women in the industry, were just acting like their plight was the same as some farm workers in California who had written this amazing letter to the women of Hollywood. And they were like, oh, I can totally relate. And I was just like, respectfully, I don't think so. I know I can't, but I recognize that I can't relate. And I think more of us need to recognize what we can't relate to and educate ourselves by listening to these women and not flattening their experiences.
I just want to thank the person who just asked that question, because I think that's an extremely important element that needed to get brought up. And also thank you, Roxanne Gay, for being here.
You guys are all very kind. It's my pleasure to be here tonight.
So this is another question, kind of responding to some of the other questions that were directed at you, Laura. Can people hear me? Okay. I think you're talking about, you know, bringing in the other side's perspective, like, oh, there's these like men who are getting wrongly accused. But I don't think that's only where the fire is coming from these questions. I don't think that's the only reason people are asking you these questions, is because you're bringing up that other side. Personally, I was going to ask a similar question because you referred to, or alluded to, I guess, college students who are going to Title IX to like punish people for bad sex or for breakups. And I think that just shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what many survivors go through and what the climate is on college campuses. I don't think anybody is willingly going like with this vengeful spirit, like, oh, that guy had such bad head, I'm gonna go tell Title IX. I don't think anyone's doing that, and I think the amount of that got brought up in this conversation was just not like equivalent to the problem there. Like, I'm sure maybe there's like a couple cherry-picking cases that you can bring up, like you have, but I don't think that should be the focus of the conversation, and I don't think it should dominate conversations like this one. And I guess my actual question is, that thing you alluded to, it gave me the sense that you don't trust women, and I wanted to ask if you do trust women, and do you trust women as much as you trust men, and do you trust, you know, transgender women as much as you trust cisgender women? Do you trust black women as much as you trust white women? I want to know if you're talking about intellectual integrity, where your own biases is, and if you can acknowledge them.
I'm trying to think how to answer that. I don't think that I trust men more than I trust women. I do think, you know, as I was trying to say, that a lot of the situations that are coming forward in these processes are sort of complicated, messy situations, and that in the attempt to pronounce judgments, particularly in a campus situation, that messiness gets eliminated. And part of I understand the imperative to believe survivors and believe women, because historically women survivors haven't been believed, certainly. But I also think that, particularly as Brett is, you know, talking about the preponderance of evidence standard, 50-50 plus a feather, if an accusation against someone suffices to achieve preponderance, you've got a very flawed justice system, and that actually is pretty much the system on campus, that an accusation is sufficient to kind of wreck somebody's college career. People are, losing scholarships, kicked out of school, their lives are derailed. And it's not just white men, and it's not just men, women too are getting caught up in these situations. So in terms of belief, I actually do think, and I don't know how to achieve this, a process where due process is the phrase that's easiest to rely on, where there are actual rules of procedure as opposed to, I think there's a bit of sentimentality about women in this believe a women thing. I think I am a woman, and I think the women who are honest about their experiences also acknowledge how complicated a lot of these situations we get into are, and that oftentimes complicated things happen. That there isn't like a clear fault on either side.
But I guess my question was more, do you think that conversations like this should be like focusing so much on that? Because your answer again focused so much on like the way that fault can fall on the wrong side, and not I trust women, or I trust black women, I trust trans women, and I think also the messiness that you talk about, there's messiness in your own answer, because you're saying women are sentimental, like it's drawing on your own internalized misogyny. And I think that has come up multiple times during this talk, and I think that's the messiness that you also need to acknowledge. Thank you.
I said at the outset, and I've said it a couple of times, I think that we have to be able to believe that like 12 different things are true at once. And so I guess that's the position that I would try to adhere to, because it seems like the honest one to me. The phrase came up before, performing wokeness. And I think that's something that I actually sort of temperamentally veer against. So I'm not sort of interested in performing my wokeness here, because I think it's not an intellectually honest position to take. So this is the best that as somebody who has researched this over a number of years, who's been through this process, is trying to tell you some of the experiences that I've had and that I've learned about in as intellectually honest a fashion